Good evening, and thank you everybody for being here this evening. I'm Mark Sanchez. I write for MIBiz here in town, and have been actually kind of fascinated over Birgit, I think it's 3 years, February, that you announced this publicly?
Yeah, we announced in January of 2020. Right ahead of the pandemic.
Before everything started.
Before everything started going crazy, so.
It's been fun to write about, and one of the things that struck me, I didn't quite fully understand this, and listening to a couple of conversations, is you not only put this together over the last almost 3 years, you put this together in conditions in an environment that nobody has ever seen before. You did this remotely.
Yes, we did.
So that is impressive. So first let me introduce these folks here. First, everybody knows Birgit. Birgit is the co-founder and serves as executive chair of the New Community Transformation Fund Board of Directors. She is the retired president, CEO of The Right Place after serving 33 years. I think we ran into each other once or twice in those 33 years in my reporting career. And she has more than 40 years of experience in economic development, and that brings a unique value proposition to the fund. Skot Welch is co-founder and a member of the board of directors for the New Community Transformation Fund. He has 30 plus years of experience in international business and diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting. He has pioneered diversity and inclusion initiatives for Fortune 500 firms in Asia, Europe, Africa, and South America. He is founder of Global Bridge Builders here in Grand Rapids, and he's advised many of the Fortune 500's largest global brands, from Ford Motor Company, Johnson & Johnson, Motorola, ABC Disney, Sprint Communications, and Cisco Systems. Dale Grogan, everybody knows, he has 35 years of financial services experience, investing, and entrepreneurship that he brings to the new Community Transformation Fund and Holdings. He serves on the investment committee and is CEO for NCTF Holdings. He started and grown several businesses, including a publicly traded software company, as well as an investment banking firm. And of course, Ollie Howie. Good to finally meet you. We've chatted so many times already. Howie is managing director, or Ollie is managing director of NCTF. As the first black fund manager in the state of Michigan, Ollie is a model breaker. He is a Harvard University graduate with a degree in economics, and he comes to Grand Rapids from global investment manager SoftBank Group. He also spent time on the investment team at Green Spring Associates, and he's received numerous awards and recognition, including the list, this is another publication in town, of the 200 most powerful business leaders in Grand Rapids. And then Scott McLean. McLean or McLean?
McLean.
Thank you. Managing Director for Spectrum Health Ventures, which is a strategic partner in LP. I will not ask you about the name, don't worry. Scott also serves as chair for the NCTF Investment Committee. He has a diverse background in corporate finance and private equity investing, along with substantial entrepreneurial experience, having started and operated several companies. Some of the investments he's been involved with include NH Learning Solutions, ThinkWise, Review Media, Best Source Publishing, and Fading Capital Group. Or Falding Capital Group, I'm sorry.
Fading sounds horrible.
It does, doesn't it? I am due for new glasses. And then, finally, Renee Tabben. She serves as both the president for Bank of America Grand Rapids and as the managing director for Merrill Lynch Wealth Management in West and Central Michigan. As the bank's enterprise leader for West Michigan, Renee is responsible for coordinating all lines of business so that clients benefit from everything that Bank of America has to offer. She also leads associates in making a positive impact in the Grand Rapids community, including employee volunteer programs and philanthropic support for local organizations. And as we say, BOA was one of the first supporters of this initiative. So let's start off with, for Renee and Scott, why, when Birgit and Scott came to you And they said, we've got this idea. And I always, in 35 years of reporting and 25 years as a business reporter, everything, I think about all those times, all those great ideas that started off with somebody saying, what if? What if? So when they came
I think,
to
Renee,
you,
you guys jumped in first, so why don't you go ahead and take this question first?
So from your perspective, why invest in this? Why did this make strategic sense for your organizations?
Yeah, I appreciate the question very much, and good evening. As I was thinking about the group of people that would be in the room tonight, there's so many different reasons to be grateful to be part of the West Michigan business community. And I think this story underlines one of them, which is nothing can take the place of relationship. And this idea of collaboration is just, it's in everything we do. It's what we do here. And so when Birgit approached me and we had a very lengthy discussion, it was one of those conversations where 2 or 3 sentences into it, you felt like you were saying the same thing, like you were finishing each other's sentences, right? And so it was pretty instant for a couple different reasons. First and foremost, I think the integrity and the experience that Birgit represents and the experience that we had as an organization with her work as an economic developer was both inspiring as well as we learned a lot, right? We, as an organization, watching what she had led in terms of results and measured outcomes was a good model for me personally and for my organization. And then secondly, so that gives you the infrastructure and the trust to start a conversation. And then secondly, when you talk about the purpose of what the fund is built to do, it directly aligns with our values at Bank of America, and that is simply to match profits with purpose. And nothing could be more important than providing an economic mobility, making an impact on workforce development, and really crafting a strategy in which we can create sustainable generational wealth for people across West Michigan, regardless of where they came from. And so it was an immediate yes. And I think she's the one who had to end the call. So I'm pretty pleased she called me.
Scott?
Yeah, thank you. By the way, I'm about to have a panic attack down here. The last time I was in this room was about, I'm actually kidding, but maybe not. The last time I was in this room and a panel, I sat in this chair. And you can see how close I am to the edge, right?
Oh, you can move.
I moved my chair to address the speaker and flipped off the back of the stage. And I swear the stage was at this height back then. So
You've got video of that somewhere, right?
I'm sure there's video of it, and I'm teasing, but let's scoot down a little bit. What was the question? No, so our answer is very similar from Spectrum Health Ventures. Our answer is very similar to Bank of America in that it's an important part of our company's culture and part of our mission to include equity in how we deliver healthcare services in terms of how our hiring practices, how we promote a good culture. But I sit in a little bit different seat than the rest of our organization. I sit in the seat of an investor who has to get returns for its organization. And to me, certainly the social impact was important, but this is not a social impact fund. This is a fund that is intentionally built to get returns. And as an investor, I looked at the opportunity to look for companies and look for opportunities where maybe no one else is fishing. I mean, there's no all the statistics would indicate there's a lack of purposeful investing in minority-owned businesses, and so why not be purposeful about it? Why not be purposeful about it? Why not make it part of how we operate and go find opportunities that many other people may be skipping over? And for me, it was really more of an economic decision than it was even a social impact decision.
As investors for your organizations, what was your initial reaction when you were presented with this idea? And then what sold you? What was your aha moment that said, okay, we can do this and we want in?
Well, again, for me, for our investment portfolio, we look for opportunities to get diversification, not necessarily from an equality standpoint. We look for diversification in terms of geographic diversification of investments, the types and sectors of investments. Obviously, we mostly invest in healthcare, but we'd like to have the opportunity to see other types of businesses, different stages of companies, so whether they're early stage companies or maybe a little bit later stage, figuring out the right portfolio economics for us and diversity of opportunities was one of our big decision-making factors. And when we looked at the new Community Transformation Fund, it was a perfect fit to wedge in between all of our other investment theses. So for us, it was a pretty quick decision.
Yeah, from the Bank of America point of view, the conversation with Birgit and Skot aligned perfectly with a broader commitment that we made later on in June of 2020. So Bank of America committed to a 4-year investment to the tune of $1.25 billion in a variety of ways that we could address economic mobility, workforce development in parts across the country where access to capital hadn't really arrived for those of minority or people of color. And so you have these two things happening at the same time. They definitely overlap. I would say the other thing is that our focus in that commitment to 1.25 was all around how do we create jobs? How do we focus on small businesses? How do we make a difference in healthcare? How do we create housing so that the entire community can benefit? And when you look at what the fund has to offer, again, it was almost as if they had the playbook before we had the playbook.
This started coming together in 2020, where there were certainly some events going on in this country, the tragedy in Minnesota. Did some of those events affect your thinking that this is time to step up and do more?
Yeah, I would say on behalf of Bank of America, we've always been active in this space of contributing to our communities, but I do think the tragic events of George Floyd accelerated the need for action and the need for example.
And my answer would be, I think for our health system, it maybe brought a broader spotlight to issues of equity, inclusion, and diversity. As purely an investor, if this fund made sense before the events of George Floyd, it would make sense after the event. To me, that was an event, but when you're making good economic and investment decisions, those transcend events. They actually are something you look at a little bit more formulaically. I hate to be so obtuse about it, but that for us, it was the right investment anyways, regardless of those situations.
So, and I'm thinking for both of you, you had to go into a meeting internally and talk to the folks upstairs and say, I want some money to do this. Did you have to sell this idea internally within your organizations? And if you did, what was the selling point? How did you convince folks to make this investment?
If you've ever been part of a large institution or a large organization that has good process routines and fact checking, you know that it's not a single conversation, and you better have a pretty compelling story and reason behind it. I would tell you that the due diligence that Bank of America has taken place not only on this fund, but to date we've invested in over 60 like funds across the country to the tune of $188 million so far. That is not unlike any other review process, due diligence process. It's not going to be based on relationship only. So the fund itself, the whole idea behind it, the governance behind it had to stand on its own.
And for us, it was a pretty easy yes. Now, remember, a lot of the investments we make, we're investing in companies, so you can review the track record. There's a whole due diligence checklist you go through. And so for us, it mostly came down to the mission and a lot of the people on this stage who our system is known for a long time and has a lot of confidence and faith in. and it was an important thing for us to be involved in. So it was a pretty quick yes.
Great. Moving down the list, Ollie. And as I said, good to finally meet you in person after our phone conversations over the last year since you arrived, and welcome.
Thank
Hope
you.
everything's well for you. What exactly does the fund look for when investing? I mean, the goals and the returns. What do you look for out there when you're vetting and scouting for prospects?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as Scott McLean alluded to, this fund will have social impact, but it's not a social impact fund. We don't want to sacrifice returns on capital for making a good impact in the community. And so I spent my career in venture capital. Before this, was at Greenspring Associates, as you talked about, and just didn't see enough of Black and brown folks actually getting the checks as the entrepreneurs, as the CEOs, as the C-suite members, and wanted to take that methodology, though, towards investing in folks of color. And so the same type of rigorous diligence that we had at Greenspring. Justin was also a team member back then, and now COO of Zill Money. But that same rigorous investment approach is taken today. And so we underwrite to a 3x net for our limited partners. This isn't guaranteed. It's not a formal pitch, but that's what we do internally. We make sure that we can make at least 3 times our money when we invest in any single company. And we look all through the US, even globally, for companies that would fit our community here in West Michigan, that would fit what we're trying to build, and would fit the going forward growth of our community, of their company, of our fund. And so we're really excited that there are enough opportunities out there in West Michigan, globally, that are led by diverse teams that we can produce venture-like returns, or at least underwrite to that, while also making a great impact. And so we really just want to invest more in the underinvested, in folks that may not have amazing connections to get that capital, but that have an amazing idea, an amazing vision, an amazing company that they're building, that we can just get behind, wrap around support, and really help catalyze. And so, to be more blunt, we look at companies that are focused in information technology, advanced manufacturing, fintech, healthcare. You'll see some of our portfolios companies later today. We look at post-seed plus companies, so companies that have raised capital before, that are going to be raising another round in the future, and that we can continue to help and wrap around support, but not necessarily ideas at the early stage, but something that's more mature, that has team members, that's looking to grow into the next level. And so that's really what we look for at a high level, and every company is different, but all the companies that we've invested in so far and the ones in the future are going to change things for the better, and that's what we look for.
How's your deal pipeline right now in terms of prospects? Are you getting the types of looks that you were hoping to get, and or you need to get at this point in time in the life of the fund?
Yeah. Like I said, it's great, robust deal flow that's out there globally in our backyard that we just really need to cultivate and make sure that they have support. And we don't think that ideas just happen in a certain phenotype. Everybody has amazing ideas. Really, the execution is very tremendously hard. And so how do we make that easier for folks of color and folks that can have the same great mountain-moving ideas, but maybe not the same resources as other folks that grew up in a different family? And so how do we make that playing field even and level? And that's what we really look for. As far as the deal flow, we have national deal flow. We have deal flow in our backyard, and really it's about cultivating that deal flow, making sure that companies see us as a great place to land, not only from the dollar perspective, but then also from the support that we can provide from folks on the stage that have dedicated their careers, put dollars and time and effort into making sure that everything is for everyone. And I think you recently said an economy is not working unless it works for everyone, right? And
Simple
so,
concept. Yep.
right,
It's gotta
right.
work for everybody.
It's got to work for everybody, and so that's what we're doing here. We have great deal flow, but we continue to need the community to catalyze that deal flow, and it doesn't stop with an investment. It actually starts, and that's when the journey begins, and we have to continue to add value post-investment.
Yeah, in that whole aspect, it's not just financial capital you're providing. When you have an investment, you've got that intellectual capital of all those organizations, entrepreneurial support organizations in Grand Rapids and West Michigan that you're partnering with to, if I remember correctly, to help that company succeed and grow and meet their goals.
Right, right.
Dale, tell us about the growth of the fund, not only from where you are in raising the capital to make investments, but boy, a few months ago, I wrote a story about folks in Denver you connected with. I believe it was Denver.
It was indeed.
That there's a new Community Transformation Fund Denver now going. So
Don't tell everyone.
tell folks about that, about how that's going, and that this thing is spreading. A good idea likes to go elsewhere.
Well, that's right. Good ideas are not bound by geography. And when Birgit and Skot came up with this idea, it was principally for Grand Rapids, because that was Birgit and Skot's backyard, our backyard. We all live here. We all work here. We found that as we got a little bit of press, there were a lot of inbound calls coming. People saying, how did you do this? Why did you do this? How can we do this? And we really found out that there are three things that are necessary for this really to work, to have, in our mind, a new community transformation fund framework. One, you have to have a really sophisticated economic development organization. Birgit started it here. Randy, thank you for continuing what the great work is going on here in Grand Rapids. But you have to have those resources and that sort of acknowledgement that, number two, entrepreneurship is important. You must have engaged entrepreneurs. And then three, finally, you have to have money. You have to have all of these in some sort of combination. And when we found out about some interest from some folks in Denver, we went out and went through this process and described what was happening here in Grand Rapids. And they raised their hand very, very quickly and said, we'd like to do that as well. Can you teach us? Can you show us? Can you partner with us? And that's how this sort of affiliation idea came to pass, which was we've created a model here in Grand Rapids, and we think that it is generally applicable to other areas so long as those three components are in place. Denver is doing it, and they're doing it well. But let me say one more thing, Mark. I know, look, I've got the microphone, and I'm not letting it go. No, but the point that's important to note is we're not done with our work here. Raising a fund, getting it launched, and making investments is only the first part of what we're doing. We have to have realizations where the entrepreneurs make millions of dollars, where the investors make millions of dollars, where the community makes millions of dollars. That is the benchmark of measurement of success. It's not just starting a fund, it is starting the next fund. And so to finish up on your question about where are we going, Fund 2, Fund 3, Fund 4, 50 cities. That's what we want to do. The goal is to create 1,000 millionaires of people of color through New Community Transformation Fund. Can I get an amen for that?
Amen.
All right.
And the ball's already rolling. So I have to ask, where do you go next? Who are some of the other prospects out there where you may go around the country?
Birgit?
Well, if you look at, we are in conversations with other cities that have approached us, and I don't want to mention them here because that would be breaking a confidentiality, but some of them are in the Midwest, some of them are in the South. I have a good friend in economic development in California, been chatting with. But I also have to say, part of it was through Bank of America, because when Renee's colleagues in Denver and in Sacramento and in other places said, "What are you doing?" And her boss, Mr. Moynihan, said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to invest in venture capital." And, no offense, but bankers are not venture capitalists. And he said, "If you don't know how to do it, go talk to those people in Grand Rapids. Go talk to Renee." And so the phone rang, and she said, "Go talk to Birgit and Skot." So when the fund in Denver got started earlier in the summer, I met Renee's colleagues, and they said, "Oh, glad to meet you," right? So it was really personal relationships, like everything, right? Isn't that what really happens? It's connections, it's networks. In this case, it was Bank of America's network, and really the commitment of the bank to commit, $1.5 billion to some of these efforts. And so then we take over from there and start talking to our colleagues. And, this is not an overnight 24-hour kind of, we did it. I mean, these are long conversations. As Dale said, you got to have an organization like an economic development organization that takes the lead, that has the connections in that community, that can talk to the Renees and the Garricks of that community and get this going. Because every economic developer, I'm still a member of the International Economic Development Council, are looking for similar things. Every community is struggling with, how do we engage entrepreneurs of color in our community? How do we make it happen? In some cases, they want to do grants. In some cases, they want to do venture capital. So I just thought that this model was a hand up, not a handout. And that, in fact, there are enough really, really good ideas residing in entrepreneurs of color that you can actually have a return. Because here's something that we get asked all the time. Well, how do you make grants? We don't make grants. We invest. We invest because we believe that the people we invest in really can make it work. That's the difference, So there is a whole network out there of economic development organizations that are looking for solutions and ideas, and ours can be replicated.
Birgit and Scott as well, it's hard to believe 3 years ago, almost 4 years that you came up with the idea. When you rolled this out publicly a few years ago, what was the reaction in the community, in the business community? What reaction did you receive?
Well, initially it was, how do you make grants? Right? Which is a paradigm that if it's going to be this type of fund, and again, to Scott's point, this is not a social impact fund. It will have social impact, but what we were bumping into, Mark, was the paradigm that if it was, you're talking about communities of color, it had to be grant oriented, and that's not the case. And so part of it was dealing with the myth and helping them understand that this is a venture capital fund, and it's unapologetically so, because the focus is actually to create generational wealth within communities of color. So that was really the main thing that sometimes Birgit and I would kind of go back and forth in our post conversations and say, oh man, we've got to really, really continue to hit that. That was probably one of the biggest things, Mark.
Well, it comes down to that, give them a loaf of bread or teach them how to bake.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, it's well, I mean, if you look at the companies that have become investors, and you mentioned it earlier, we did all of this literally during COVID. So Lauren Andrulis, who's still in the room, I think. Lauren was our attorney for all the documents. We never had one meeting in person to create the documents for this fund. Never, because we couldn't. And then we dialed, I call it dial for dollars. And we had all of our meetings. Once we got post our first meetings and then our rollout, everything was online. I mean, everything was in a Zoom or a team meeting. And so, we had a whole pitch going. This is what we do. We had the documents. We had the limited partners. What was a little bit of a hiccup, or not a hiccup, but somewhat of a hindrance, is we didn't yet have our managing director. Okay? So, and we always had to say, well, it was a chicken and an egg thing, because, we had to have the money to pay a managing director, and, but, I can remember our meeting with Tina and at Spectrum and Matt, and it was a very easy, oh yeah, we get it here. It was 2 minutes, right? And then some of them took a little longer, and then we had a meeting with, John Kennedy. All right, I get it. I'll write you a check. So, and some took a little longer, but overall, within a year, we raised $10 million. And so I would say that the reaction was what I would expect from Grand Rapids, because this is a community that gives.
What impact do you think you're having today, or that you've had so far?
Well, I think we changed at least the conversation that this can happen in this community.
Yes.
Okay? Because it's a mid-sized town in the upper Midwest that's doing exceptionally well, obviously. We're sitting in it all. But this started here. It didn't start in Atlanta. It didn't start in, name the big city. It started here. And part of the reason was, my thought was, we can do better for our communities of color. Period.
Was part of one of those early hurdles was the cultural change. If you look at the data, and I think PitchBook has it, I know the Michigan Venture Capital Association, in its annual report, has some of this data. This is an area where historically capital has flowed not well,
Right.
little. So was it kind of that cultural, we need to look over here too. There are some great ideas coming from
Oh, for sure.
this area, and if we're not looking there, we're going to miss some great ideas and some great entrepreneurs.
Well, that's what you said, right? Go fishing where nobody else is fishing.
Yeah, that made the most sense for us. I mean, for me, from an investment standpoint, those are the opportunities that oftentimes have the best returns, is when maybe everyone's not looking at them.
For Renee and Scott, looking back as limited partners and looking at the business case for your investments, take us through some of the mechanics on how you went through that process of making that decision of investing in the fund and the investments are, and what it really took to get to that point.
I can start with that. And I think I've explained a little bit that it, for us, came a lot down to the diversification opportunities for our overall portfolio. But specific for me, I also wanted to engage not just as an investor, but I wanted to be on the investment committee for the fund, because I thought with the experience that we could bring, and maybe even some of the resources of our health system, that we could not only help potentially make the right investment decisions, but also contribute, hopefully, in quite a few ways to the success of the companies after we invest. And as Ollie talked about earlier, making the investment is like the easiest part of the whole thing. It's what you do afterwards. Excuse me. And I think that along with the board, the right place and some of the resources they can bring, and the investment committee and all of the relationships that we have, we can do a lot more for the companies than just give them money.
I appreciate the question, and I think that you framed that out really well. I would say that my role as president for Grand Rapids for Bank of America, you get a broad-based theme that we're, as an organization, going to invest in this purpose. And then my role is locally to be boots on the ground. And we get wonderful communications from the fund. We hear great commentary from Ollie. It's wonderful to know many of the people who are in the room and the actual companies. I can walk over and I can touch it, right? So that's my job as the local representative for this giant organization, to make sure that the investment that we've signed up for is actually happening and is valid. So all of that is confirmed in the due diligence process that they do with any fund that is brought to the committee.
As investors, as limited partners in the fund, what's your expectations for returns? What do you expect to see as a return on your investment? And I don't mean that in just financial terms either.
Good. Because as a financial person, there's a lot of really good lines there. I would tell you that for us as a company, it supersedes the return, right? It is, expected that this is a good investment. It's expected that we've hired the right professionals to do what they do well, right? I think what goes beyond maybe the financial expectations is the example that it sets. It's the calling that we have as an organization to really smart, hardworking entrepreneurs out there to say, this is the place to come get stuff done. You want to be in West Michigan as a part of this community, and look at what's happened over here, right? So my expectation is that this is going to bring more growth and more opportunity to our community.
So all the investments that Spectrum Health Ventures makes have dual components. Certainly, we want the financial and economic return, and I think Ollie just talked a minute ago about underwriting to a 3x return. That's typical of what we like to look for. But the other aspect is the strategic impact. Now, many of the investments we make, we measure the strategic impact they have to our health system. I mean, if it's a new therapeutic or a medical device or some sort of digital health application, we measure the financial impact that can have in terms of increasing patient quality, reducing costs, all the above. And for the new Community Transformation Fund, while it's not all healthcare specific, I think the community impact that we can measure, not just in terms of the returns it provides to the new Community Transformation Fund investors, but the returns it provides to the community. And I think, as Renee was just saying, the growth opportunity, and actually having West Michigan looked at as a productive place for founders of color to want to come. And if we can start to build the momentum towards that, then, you know, I'd love to see Fund 2 and 3 and 4 contribute to that, but I think we need to have a lot of other contributors to it. And if this can be the catalyst to get it started, fantastic. I think it's a great economic measurement for us.
Just to throw in a question, it's not necessarily on our list. I've heard the line in the last 2.5+ years as we've all lived through this situation and navigated through it, that pivot. You had to change, you had to adjust to the circumstances. As you got from point A to today, what are some of those curveballs you had to learn to hit? What are some of the pivots that you had to make to adjust to the circumstances?
That's a good Birgit question.
Pivot.
Well, the pivot, first of all, was when we had the idea and we got the seed money and we had the announcement, and 2 months, literally 2 months later, everything shuts down. Everything shuts down. Nobody was working. There was nobody anywhere, right? So what do? Do you put it off and hope to wait till it all passes? Or do you just say, we can't lose the time, because then you lose the momentum? So we said, no, we'll just keep rolling. And we did. And, we hired, when we had enough money to be able to go out and look for our managing director, we did that online. I mean, we just had to adapt and be flexible to get to where we wanted to go. And, and here we are. So it's the pivot was in how do you work through a pandemic when you're trying to create something from scratch, new, different, nothing never done before.
And there's no playbook on how to do it.
There isn't, but then you have a stubborn German, so there we are.
I've never noticed that in you.
Mark,
I
I might add on to that. One of the things that we learned through this whole process, going back to that affiliate model, is that this, in fact, is scalable, that there are other places that can benefit from this, that this model can work elsewhere. One of the things that's also a lesson learned is it's really hard to raise a venture fund. To go to somebody and say, hey, Scott, I've got an idea. I've never really done this before. No one's done it in this space, but we think it's going to be great. How about $1 million? Are you kidding me? That is a hard sale. Credit Birgit and Scott and the founders to be able to go on vision, to be able to raise enough money to go and bring in a managing director of Ollie's ilk. To go into another city to say, we want to do this again, it's really difficult. What we've been able to learn is by bringing community together, by saying we have venture capital investors that are monitoring, managing, and helping to teach and grow up the managing directors so that they can be, they're called emerging managers, right? If you're on a first or second or third time fund, to be an emerging manager so you can go and do it yourself, that is a win. The numbers are startlingly awful in terms of deployment to black and brown communities. It's less than 4% of all venture capital raised, and it is less than 1% in terms of managers of color. There is one African American manager of color, manager of a venture fund in the state of Michigan, and he's sitting right there. One. I think we can do better.
And that's a great point you make, because it's not just the flow of capital, the monetary flow, but it's also that talent.
You bet.
And how often do we hear that term anywhere in business the last few years?
We do.
Talent.
And I think if I could project a dream, is that there will be a network of funds managed by managers of color for entrepreneurs of color. A whole network.
I look forward to writing about it. I think we're bumping up on time. Ollie, if I win the lotto tonight and I want to invest in the fund, who do I contact? Who should I call, and how do I go about this?
I'll take your call and check. Right? No, but seriously, anybody on the stage is a resource. We really want to make this community effort just that, a community effort. And we really need folks in the community that have capital, that want to see it go towards a great mission, not only returns, which this asset class has done better than others through the pandemic, but also impact in your community. You can see it, it's tangible. We'll talk to some entrepreneurs right now, but we're really excited about just starting with the check and continuing the journey of creating 1,000 millionaires of color, hopefully a few billionaires, and folks that actually change the next generation. Folks that, growing up, you can see Anthony Chang building something that can change cancer forever. And seeing someone like Melissa being able to change the way that we see clinical trials forever in the history of our nation and world. And so that is what we are being a part of today. And we would love folks in our community that are like-minded, that are aligned with our goals to be a capital participant and more in what we're looking to build.
Thank you. So thank them all for the work they're doing. Scott, Dale, Scott, Birgit, Renee, Ollie. Thank you all.